For anyone who doesn't know me, which is quite a few new faces I'm pleased to see, my name's Bill Boorman. My background is I'm a recruiter, really. I've worked in and around recruiting for about 30 years. I've been trying to give it up. It's a day at a time at the moment. It's a day at a time. It's been about 11 years since my last placement, but really everything I do is think about recruiting. And what I do is a good question, really. But what I do is I work a number of things. I work with technology companies, startups around the globe. I work with about 7 on things like product, design, user interface, how to make things work actually from a recruiter's point of view, which is the most important thing. I've noticed today we're talking a lot about the candidate experience. Very few people talking about the recruiter experience, which is kind of the critical element of it. If the recruiter experience isn't any good, then the candidate experience also isn't. I'm going to talk a little bit about that during today's presentation. I do 2 implementations a year. So my implementations are buying technology, working on methodology and brand. I work with some great corporate companies. I'm surprised they let me in, but they do. So people like KPMG and Oracle. Naspers is the current one, which is the 6th biggest internet company in the world that no one's ever heard of. So we're kind of working on that. The BBC, Hard Rock Cafe, people like that. So I do that kind of thing. And I run an event, which is really the research part of what I do, called True, which is the Recruiting Unconference. And in the last 12 months, I've been to 65 countries and probably talked or listened or drank with about 2,500 recruiters and branding people and of all kinds of shapes and sizes. Tomorrow is my True London event, which is one of the big 5 recruiting events in the world that goes on just in Austin Friars. Kind of crazy. But that's the end of the commercial because I have nothing else to sell. So now we can get down to the proper bit of talking about what we're going to talk about. I am the one in the hat, as it says. What is the meaning of life? What's the meaning of life? I wanted to know this. I was curious. Does anyone know what the meaning of life is? Can anyone tell me what the meaning of life is? 47. The meaning of life is 47. The meaning of life used to be 47. If you ask Google, it'll tell you it's a job from Indeed. Because that's the answer to everything when you ask Google. What is? And I'll give you an example. Last night, we were trying to understand what does all this data mean? And we were having quite a high-level conversation at about 1 o'clock this morning, aided in some way by the inebriation. And we were coming up with some great solutions. And somebody asked a question, and they said, who is the office manager in the US version of The Office? Because we couldn't remember what the name was. We were trying to figure out who someone looked like. Someone said, I know, as you always do. I'm going to Google that. Bear in mind, we're sitting in a bar in London. And the person who Googled it is with me this week. It's from New York. George is here somewhere. Goes into his phone, Googles it, and says, office manager, New York. First thing that comes up is a job from Indeed. Right, the answer to everything. And this isn't an ad for Indeed. It could be Career Builder, could be any number of aggregators. But it's the way in which the world works, which is really important for us. And I don't think we've quite understood it from a recruiting point of view of what's happening. And it's not just recruiting, it's life. Because what's the meaning of life? The meaning of life is whatever the internet tells us it is. Because the internet tells us what books to write. It tells us which people to date, which people to marry, which people just to hook up with in a passing occasion, what restaurants to go to, what hotels to stay at, what jobs to take, what content to look at. Because we think we live in this World Wide Web, which in the beginning made the world wider and gave us access to more and more things, and now is making the world more and more narrow and is determining what we see. If we go to Google and put in search results, we all get unique results based on our data, right? Because what's happened is what is data? What does data mean? You'll find all kinds of answers, usually written by people who have books to sell. This is my definition. Personal data is the inexhaustible trail you leave behind that determines everything that's going to happen to you in the future. Everything that you do, every time you like something on Facebook, you check in somewhere, you just use your phone from a location, you travel to somewhere, you use a technology, you look at a website, the amount of time you look at that website, how long you look at that page, who you connect with on LinkedIn, who you connect with on Facebook, who your friends are, what books you like, what books you order, where you get it from. That determines what the internet thinks of you, because you're leaving this data trail, right? And that's kind of pretty dangerous, because I saw somebody speaking. I read a book. This isn't my book, but it's the best book you can read. It kind of changed the way I viewed the world when I read it the first time. It's called Callism by Christian Rudder, Who We Are. And what Cataclysm is, if you're really interested in who you have the strongest relationships with, who you should be married to, who your partner should be, go to dataclysm.com and put your Facebook account in. It will tell you who you have the closest relationship with. It will almost definitely not be your partner. So do it privately. Doesn't get recorded or published. And the reason I'm saying that is if we think about how's the world changed, 51% of people who get married now begin their relationship online. 51%. So more people who get married or have a partner, forget about jobs for a minute, more people who get married start online. That doesn't mean in a place like Match.com or OkCupid or anything like that. Maybe it's someone you first connect with on Facebook or Twitter or in a Stack Overflow, in some kind of forum. 51% of relationships begin online. And the only people we connect with online is who the internet tells us people we might know. The only content that we see is content that the internet believes we would be interested in, right? Which is based on things that we've opened in the past. It's based on what's called the two things which drive what the internet thinks we are our digital footprint and who we're connected with. What does it mean, who we're connected with? What it means is it is impossible to have a personal identity and a professional identity. That cannot exist. Because the internet doesn't know you're at work now. It actually does. It knows where your desk is and when you go to the bathroom and how long you stay there. And it can be used in that way. Because we leave that kind of footprint, right? We're leaving footprints everywhere we go. Every time we have a mobile device on or turned off, it's logging our location, where we're going, what we're doing, how much time we're spending things. If you send personal messages, if you're using anything like Facebook Messenger, Twitter, WhatsApp, any of these kind of places where we do personal messages, the sentiment of that message determines how the internet decides you have a relationship with that person, right? So it decides who we are. So we have to look at it and say we've got two things. If we're trying to, there's a whole load of tools you're going to hear about, a whole load of technology, and I work with technology all the time. The big buzzword now, big data, predictive analytics. Lots of people will go, we've got this predictive analytics tool. What they actually mean is we have this horoscope guess machine. That's kind of what they mean. And the best example I can give you of that is in 1997, it was the highest rates of divorce in the UK. Highest rates of divorce in the UK. Equally, in 1997, was the greatest import of bananas into the UK. Therefore, the machine says, when we eat more bananas, we all get divorced. Right? Because the data says that. And that's kind of how a lot of our predictive analytics tools really are. There's not enough science or enough data that's got into it. So what we have to look at, first of all, is it cause or is it coincidence? Do these two things happen at the same time mean one is because of the other? So what we should really be using data to is to ask the questions, not to find the answers. That's what we should be using personal data tools to. That's what we should be doing in recruiting. We should be able to ask the questions of where is the right next job and what's... I could tell you, with just 3 simple pieces of technology, the likelihood of someone getting a job in your organisation. I can tell you that. And I can give you a score that's about 94% accurate. It's not mine, but I can use 2 or 3 pieces of technology to tell you culture fit, skills fit, experience fit, and benchmark against all the people you've ever hired. Because all that data is available. It's all on LinkedIn or somewhere, right? Loads of places I can go. But you still have to look at it and say, is that coincidence or is that cause? And not make decisions. So what we have is we have data. We can use data for good to make things better. Candidate Experience Awards are here. A massive, passionate advocate. I think everyone should do it. Everyone, every company should be involved in the Candidate Experience Awards. And if you're not, you don't really care about candidates, right? It's dead simple. It's dead simple. It's a black and white issue for me. It means we talk a lot about it, just don't really do anything about it. Go do the survey, get the data. That's really, really important for me. And if you don't do it with the Candidate Experience Awards, find out how they do it and go and do it. Because we're passionate about this. We want to make things better. Because it's shit. It's horrible being a candidate. It's terrible to go apply for a job. Using data to make things better. That's data for good. That's saying every time someone does anything on our career site, They take an interview, they do a video, we have a phone call, they connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook. We can track anywhere they go and everything they do, and we can use it for good to make things better. So we can use it for good, or we can do what most people think about, is we can use data for evil. And this is going to be a big thing, right? Especially in the UK, data for evil. Most of the predictive analytics products I'm looking at are evil machines designed by Dr. Death. Right? Two that I can think of particularly, and if you buy me beer later, I'll tell you which products they are. And that's a promise. Two that I can think, but they're not sponsors, I will tell you that. Two companies, because Ken told me not to mention that. So two companies I can definitely tell you about when we talk about data for evil. What are they looking at? Using something which started as actually not a bad idea, which is we'll look at your LinkedIn connections, we'll see who's connected with recruiters, we'll see who's behaving in a certain way on the internet, so that as a recruiter we can tell you if you message this person, they're more likely to be interested in a job than if you message that person. Pretty good, pretty simple principle. Then someone went, let's turn it on its head and let's start sending a message to the HR manager that says this person who works for you is looking for a job. Flight risk. How long before someone gets fired on the basis of that information? Kind of like people getting divorced because they imported bananas. That's the story. That's the way I look at it. You went to a conference, met some, or any of you came to this conference, met some recruiting people, connected with them on LinkedIn. Your boss gets a message that says you're looking for a job. Right? Data for evil. So that's what we've got to think about. When we talk about predictive analytics, what messages are we trying to take? And how are we using personal data? Because if we don't use it, we're at a cusp. If we don't use it in a responsible way, people are going to stop doing things. They're going to stop liking things on Facebook. They're going to stop registering on sites. They're going to stop going to your career sites. They're going to stop looking at things. They're going to stop connecting with you. They're going to stop connecting with your employer brand content because it sets up an alert on some boss's radar, right? So we have to think about how we can use this data. And the big trend that's going to happen, it's started already, so you need to start thinking about it when you're talking about data and how you use this information, is Google lost the court case. So if Google lose it, everyone's going to lose it. That you have a right to privacy. You have a right to become anonymous. You can't be remembered forever on the internet. You have a right to disappear. Whereas before, you were remembered as long as people found you, right? And whether it was what was found was true or false, if you were found, that now has changed. So what I believe is going to happen, and this is a theory, there's a great blog from the founder of DataSift called, Bob, what's the blog called? Privacy is the killer app for 2015. It's a great blog. And it basically says, in 2015, this is what's going to become important, in that we will be able to use data for trends in order to make the right decisions, but not to personalize data in order to make decisions against the individual, right? So think about that from a recruiting point of view. It's going to become really important in our sourcing strategy really quickly. So it's going to affect everything from the way and the information we can get from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Any personal data is going to be, you'll be entitled to see the trend. People like this do this and go there, and there's 500,000 data sets to prove it, so it's fairly sound. It's not based on 3 people. We asked 3 people, 2 of them said this, so that's the right answer. That means everybody. It's based on real minimum, I think, 500,000 data sets to say this is the trend. So we will begin to see, in the way that marketing do, trends that say people of this age who do this typically do this, so put your strategy around that. This is how you're going to hire. If this is the type of people, this is the age demographic, if this is what they're doing, these are the things they're going to be interested in. This is what your proposition has to be. This is what's attractive. In recruiting terms, we should be using data for good because Joel Spolsky, founder of Stack Overflow, said something to me one day which was like a light bulb moment. He said, do you know what the main role of talent acquisition is? I said, well, to get people hired in organisations. He said, no, that's too late. So the main role of talent acquisition is to give companies enough evidence to make them places where people want to work. Pretty powerful. Because we're collecting all this data about where people want to work, what they do, what their experience is, whether they're the right people, who should work in what team, what dynamic. We can use that data to say, this is what the organisation should be from a talent acquisition point of view. That's great because that also makes talent acquisition a strategic rather than a reactive function. That's kind of if we want to have careers and futures in this business, that's what we have to do. We have to become strategic and able to make decisions, and we can only get idiots who run companies to make decisions based on pictures, which come from data. Right? Idiots run companies, generally. Real people do the work. So what the real people have to do is collect enough data to draw a real picture to come back and say, this is what's happening. This house is bigger than this house, so this means this. Oh, I've got that. So we need to buy the big house then. Yeah, there you go. That's what we need to do. So that's our job in talent acquisition, to figure out how do we use data for good to help our organisations make the right decisions. Because the background that we have to this, which is a big thing, I believe the single biggest trend in talent acquisition is the aggregation of everything. Aggregation of everything. Think about it. What happens with jobs? You put a job on your career site, where does it go? Indeed. Career Builder. Monster are going to start aggregating every single job everywhere. People like Oilfinity, set up by Keith Potts, who founded JobSite, can actually aggregate every job in the world in a sector, and it takes him a day to set up the scrape and do it reasonably cheaply, right? So every job in the world is going to be aggregated to everywhere. So that means maybe we only have to put our jobs in one place. Maybe that's on our career site, maybe that's somewhere else. Or maybe we don't want it to be aggregated, so we need to not put jobs on our career site anymore. We need to change our sourcing strategy, because the problem that we have as organisations, typically, if we look after over the last 12 months, what's been the principal problem in an organisation is we've built organisations to become shit magnets. That's what we've done. We've built our organisations to attract as many of the wrong people as possible. It's because the digital media mafia hijacked recruitment, said recruiters have to become marketeers. That was great. Everyone became a marketeer. Who did the recruiting? They were too busy tweeting, right? Kind of stuff you have to think about. So how do we change that? We use data to say we create filters that nobody gets a job in the way they do now, which is to go to a job site or a career site, pull down a menu and guess whether they're qualified based on a little bit of information. Nobody should do that. All applications should be invite only. We should ask people to connect with us as companies so we can access the good data that tells us who they are, so that we can invite them to apply, which means separating candidates and applicants as two different things. Most of the time when you talk about candidate experience, what you're actually talking about is what was the application experience. When you got past the ATS, if you're one of the tiny few that managed it, that could fire eat and do all the, ride a unicycle and do all the other things you have to do in order to get an interview with no relevance to the job whatsoever, unless you're applying for the circus. And even then doesn't work if all you want to do is put the tent up, right? So do you have the pre-required skills? We look at it and say, right, how do we get through that? So then we start to think about it and say, so what's happening? What's happening with it is aggregation of everything. LinkedIn have been very, very open about this mission of what they're trying to do. They've been very open right from the beginning. There's a load of things they do which make them the dark side, right? There's lots of things they do that make them the dark side. Something they've always said, which is, I think, fundamentally good at the core, is we're going to connect every job, every opportunity with every person. As a principle, that's a great thing. We're going to know what people are, and what are we going to do with content when we aggregate stuff is people won't go looking for content, they won't go looking for jobs. Jobs and content will come to them. It's kind of how we're already doing it, because there's so much stuff, we're now saying, where do we get it? You know, I have a watch which tells me my Facebook messages, my LinkedIn messages, and my emails, and I dismiss them without looking at them. We live in a Tinder society, right? Some of you know what the Tinder society is. I can see by the smiles on your face. Some of you are looking a little bit puzzled. What that means is left swipe for right, right swipe for no. We make decisions about everything at that speed. And we usually do it on a mobile, based on information or data delivered on a mobile device, aggregated from somewhere, doing something else. You want to know the argument for mobile? Single biggest argument of why you should have a mobile strategy is when buildings are designed in Europe now, they put in as many sit-down toilet cubicles in men's toilets as ladies' toilets. They want to take out urinals, and the reason they do that is because everyone wants to sit down and check their phone. right? Even to the point where they're saying now we might as well just have unisex toilets because the privacy bit's gone out the window. Everyone wants to sit down and check the phone. So probably all these messages we're Tindering, left swipe, right swipe, we're receiving while sitting somewhere. That's what you have to think about when you communicate with people. So we've said because of everything we're receiving, what we're doing is we're doing something else. The time when someone is most likely to read your email, look at your Facebook post, go on your career site is 8:45 at night. I can tell you that. Once you use Google Analytics, the time they're most likely to do it is 8:45 at night when they're sitting on their sofa, on their phone, flicking through stuff, getting your emails, doing stuff. That means interruption marketing. That means I want the right stuff to come to, I want my feed to be right. Even now, Google Mail filters out emails which it doesn't think I want to see. It decides for me. Based on that, that's what you decided, so we're not going to show it to you anymore. Or Google says, you only ever answer results like this, so actually we're only going to show you these ones. We'll give you the other ones, but they're going to be on who actually looks for a result on page 92, apart from Glenn Cathy. He sources people who are based around about page 100 because nobody else is looking. That's a whole different story. Glenn Cathy's best sourcer in the world, by the way. Make sure you go speak with him. Aggregation of everything. So all of the information, our jobs, our candidates, the news feeds, and how is it aggregated? It's aggregated by the people we connect with. So we see stuff in Facebook, in Twitter, in LinkedIn, not in a natural feed. We see things which people we are connected with, and not just connected with, people we communicate with. What is influence in the modern age? What is influence? You will have heard people say loads of times, content is king. That's crap. Content is not king. Found content is. Only if people can find you, and they will only find you if you are connected with people like them. So your connectivity, the footprint which you leave when we talk about the aggregation of everything, who sees anything you do on the internet, and anything you do in the internet as a company will be dependent on who you are connected with and which one of those people you interact with. So the sourcing and decision about who do we talk to, who do we target, isn't about who do we get to come in for jobs. It's who are we connected with and who do we just talk to. Because I will only see, if I'm connected with I have 5,500 friends on Facebook. I must be really popular, right? They're all real friends. I've met them all. So 5,500 friends on Facebook, I will only see stuff from people who I regularly like or comment or see stuff. That's why people disappear from your feed. No one will see you if you're a lurker. No one will see you if you're one of those people who dips into the internet and just looks at stuff. No one will know you exist. You're kind of like an Eskimo living somewhere, right? Which is only good if you're hiring Eskimos. So what you've got to, if you want people to find you, you have to be engaged and interactive and liking stuff and commenting and viewing things. And you have to determine what your footprint is going to be. Not just for getting a job, not just for a career site, but what books you're going to read. Otherwise, what you're going to like, what films you're going to go and see, what restaurants you're going to go to, what products you're going to buy. Everything in your life will be determined by the aggregation of the people you are connected with. And the only thing we have control of is who that is and who we speak to. So once we get a grip of that and we start thinking about actually how much time do we dedicate to networking, communicating and engaging with the people we want to network, engage and communicate with over trying to do the business of finding applicants and candidates. Because this is where it starts. Because if we don't do that bit right, they're not going to see your jobs. They're not going to see your career site. They're not going to be recommended to you. They're not going to connect with you. Only by being in and being engaged, because the aggregation of everything means the only people who will see what you put out or what you put online is people who are connected and who you talk with. So make that choice. Aggregation of everything, and my plea to you is move away from those products, stop thinking about data for evil. Right? Recruitment business classic for it. What happens? Give us some data. Why do we want the data? We want to find out who to fire. That's what we want it for. Who's not performing? Who's not doing the job? What we want to understand is data for good. We have an opportunity to change that at this time. We won't have it again. Thanks, everybody.